Hi kids, George Weigel here. It's time for another talk from Mr. Basil. Pay attention.
Well, they said he would not and could not, but he is back for chapter 3 of Lessons to a Young Catholic, The Face of Christ. So I hope you have your sheets out and ready to do some writing as we review chapter 3. In this chapter, we want to see the face of Christ through the Christos Pantocrator, and we want to see how do we apply the Christ, the human Christ, to our lives. And not only through his incarnation, through his humanity, we find out how we are supposed to live. George Weigel is going to go to Jebel Musa, or the mountain of Moses, and it will be here that we find this is the place where Moses had an encounter with God, a theophany. And through this theophany, Moses will ask God the question, "What is your name?" God is going to respond, "My name is Yahweh. I am who am." A name so sacred that tells us everything about God. The Emperor Justinian, the Byzantine emperor, is going to build a monastery called St. Catherine's on this site. Within this monastery will be the famous icon, the Christos Pantocrator, Christ the All-Sovereign King. It's a beautiful icon, and there are many, many images that have been copied from this. But we see Christ with his hand extended in blessing and in greeting. We have him holding a Bible, and it shows us through his greeting, his humanity, his divinity. Through his fingers being crossed, it reminds us of his own cross. Through his holding the Word of God, not only is he speaking the Word of God, but he is the Logos. He is the Word of God. He has a crown. He has a halo. He is holy. He is the ultimate in the being next to God. This beautiful, beautiful image of Christ is going to show us his beautiful humanity. Through the incarnation, Christ became one of us so that we can become like him. When we examine what went wrong with humanity, we're going to find that humans went so far away from God that we almost became incapable of getting back to him. Because of this incredible gap, Christ is going to cross the great divide and become human. Through his humanity, he is going to help us get back to God through his death and through his resurrection. This is significant because we cannot do this on our own. It is through the grace of Christ that we are able to come back to God. Jebel Musa is going to be important because it will be the place where Moses encounters God. Christ will be significant because it will be through Christ that we encounter God. We see him through his humanity, but we certainly learn a tremendous amount about his divinity and about who God is. We're going to look at icons, not only the Christos, but what does an icon show us? We believe that an icon is written, not painted. It's not a representational work of art. It's not just simply something that is painted so we understand what that person looks like. It is written because we want to know what's the holiness of that person. The person who is painting this or writing this is trying to show us what can we learn from this person? How can we apply what they've done to our own lives? We know that we are consumed with selfishness. We know that we constantly move away from God. Through the icons, it gives us a chance to meditate on these very holy people and to see how to apply their virtue and their sacredness to our own lives. The Christos Pantocrator is going to be important because in it we find Christ, the human, a man who bled, a man who wept, a man who experienced all the heartaches that every human being experiences, but yet through every experience, he faces it with courage, with compassion, and with love. Those are our goals. When he was let down, he loved us even more. When we pushed him away, he ran to us. This is the Christ who is not only human, but is divine. How do we practice this in our own lives? How do we make Christ a reality? We cannot be Christians without following Christ. Religious art was seen as a threat at one point. As we moved through the 5th, 6th, 7th, and even 8th centuries, many people started to destroy icons. They took icons and they said, these are distracting us from our worship. Some people are worshiping the icons themselves. So they got rid of the icons. The Second Council of Nicaea, is going to be convened in 787 to reconcile this great debate. What do we do with religious art? Does it distract us, or does it assist us in finding God? And here's what the Second Council of Nicaea said: that we need religious art. We need statues. We need stained glass windows. We need to have paintings of virtuous people because they make present the invisible. We put pictures in our homes for this very, very simple reason. We want to remember. When someone dies, we don't take that picture and throw it out. It serves even as a greater reminder. It has greater importance because they are no longer simply tangible to us. They're not visible to us. We need to have these reminders. So the Second Council of Nicaea is going to say it's certainly fine to have, it's appropriate to have them when we kneel before a statue of the Blessed Mother. It makes her present to us. We're not praying to the statue, but rather we're using her statue to get to her through our minds and through our hearts. The icon, the statue, the stained glass window, the painting is simply a reminder to us of something that's very, very important. Never forget. That's why we put statues in front of us. We do this in our society all the time. We have street signs named after people. We have buildings named after people. We have monuments. Same thing. This is why we want to have these very, very important icons and images around us. So for us, the Christos, this icon, is going to make present the human Christ, who is always divine. But he's showing us what humanity is capable of. This love, this compassion that we often throw away because of our selfishness. We get rid of it. We cast it away. We're not interested in making this part of us. As we became prepared for the Second Vatican Council, the Church sent out a questionnaire, and they asked prominent churchmen, what do you want to discuss at the upcoming council? The Archbishop of Washington sent in what George Weigel looks at sort of a ridiculous proposal, and he said, let's see, is there life in outer space? What happens here is Weigel looks and says, how could we look to outer space when humanity is the problem? We're looking beyond our problems. That's why the submission of Karol Wojtyła was so important. Karol Wojtyła, who was the Archbishop of Krakow at the time, who will later become Saint John Paul II, is going to propose the question, how could humanity go so far off the rails in a century that really promised so much? The invention of the airplane, the automobile, the television, vaccines. We wiped out so many diseases that we became better. But yet at the same time, we had no value for life because of our own selfish will, because of our own agendas. So what happens here, especially in Nazi Poland, where Karol Wojtyła lived, he is going to see humanity at an all-time low. His best friends would disappear day after day. Whole blocks of people would vanish. So he wondered, in an age where we are supposed to be better, our minds are constantly growing, but yet what happens? We have this Holocaust. And we're throwing away people. We're bulldozing them into holes. We're using their skin for lamps. We're using bodies for soap. Humanity has reached such a horrific point. So Karawati was going to ask the question, if we're going to invent these great things, why can't we bring our hearts closer to God? And the only way we're going to do that is to practice what Christ practiced. We live as Christians far away from Christ, in an age where we should make him part of everything that we do. This is what we're called to do. He asks us to make him part of us, especially through communion. But yet we think that we can live apart from him. So what's the face of Christ? The humanity and divinity of Christ. He is one of us. He loved the unlovable. He forgave the unforgivable. When we walked away from him, he ran to us. He was the good shepherd, where the sheep were lost, and yet he constantly brings us back. The human Christ is something that we need to know because of the fact that he became one of us, and he's going to show us that even humanity can transcend itself on a day like Good Friday. When humanity is ganging up against him, he still gets up on that cross, and some of his first words were those of forgiveness. 3 days later, he's going to show us his godliness through the resurrection. He's going to show us that even death can be transcended through a relationship with God. The Christos should be at the heart of everything that we know and everything that we do in this life. We cannot live without understanding Christ. That's what the chapter is all about. Knowing the face of Christ, practicing what he had done, and making Christ a reality in everything that we do. In chapter 1, we looked at what is it to be a Catholic? How do we see the world through Catholic eyes? Everything is of consequence because Christ is at the center. Chapter 2, the greatest figure in the church, the leader of the church, was flawed. When we look at ourselves and we say, well, what can I learn? We have a lot to learn, just like Peter did. And we can always make our way through our total conversion. And it's a long road. And sometimes the only way we're going to get on that road is when Christ turns us around himself. In chapter 3, what is the face of Christ? Do I know him? Am I practicing Christ in everything that I say, in everything that I do? How do I make Christ a reality? This is our goal. This is what George Weigel wants us to know. In the Holy Sepulchre Church, it's going to be the church that marks where Jesus died on one side, and then towards the other, we're going to have the church of the tomb of the Holy Sepulchre, the actual tomb itself. So what are we going to learn from this point? We're going to learn that Christ is able to overcome everything and yet still love. And at the end, even death does not stop it. We want to look at this chapter and realize that in those moments of despair, all we need to do is look to Christ. All we need to do is make him a part of our lives. All we need to do is say, Jesus, what am I supposed to do at this moment? Without him, we are lost. This is the purpose of finding the face of Christ. So I hope you enjoyed this review of chapter 3, and I hope you took some thorough notes, and we will see you soon.